Welcome back, everyone. As promised, we have a second episode today. With our last one, we brought up Cacopial Armros, the beginning of Averant, and the end of it. Starting off with a new age where people forgot about the previous, believing that this is the beginning, and not really truly even knowing that they missed anything. Leaving only a power that cannot be trapped. Cacopial leaving her sister in a nightmare, creating a living nightmare of sorts that she cannot control, even not even knowing that she's doing this. A residue of her dark power manifested to become a sentient abomination, starting off as a small creature and slowly infecting the realm. We start off with today's episode, The Plague. Enjoy. With this new aberration, this abomination in creation, no one took it seriously at first. No one knew where it came from. No one knew what it was, but it was different. At first, people were curious. No one knew there was a source that was a god that's been hidden from time and memories. And that's what it wanted. It wanted people to stay away. It wanted to protect her. It thought everything was a threat. And she felt alone. Amros wanted somebody, so it decided to acquire friends for the loneliness. The plague itself is exactly what it sounds like, an infestation on the realm. Start off as simply as that, a infection that slowly but surely started corrupting anything it touched. And then when it touched sentient life, much like turning something into a zombie, but a little bit more, they became in touch with Amros, enslaved into the plague's will. But it was an abomination nonetheless. What the plague touched, land, water, trees, creatures, humans, tieflings, halflings, gnomes, giants, it corrupted them. And forever and a half, there was no cure. But again, it started off simple. No one took it seriously. Hitting a village at a time, it spread. But then it spread like wildfire. Knights were hired. Warriors, mages were sent in to see this simple thing needs to be stopped. But they eventually got succumbed into its will, turned into nothing of what they were. See, what the plague did was it took somebody and stripped away everything from it. Simply, when you touched it, it corrupted you, becoming a darker version of yourself and enslaved into its will, becoming nothing but a drone to its power. But in all intents and purposes, the plague is devoid from magic. For the mages, paladins, sorcerers that got corrupted by it, they lost their magic. But for those that were warriors, proficient in the blade that got corrupted by it, that turned into a different creature completely. No one could figure out how to slow this thing down. It moved very slowly. Like a wave, it pushed outward. Many people tried to figure out what it was, where it came from. Is this from our world? Is it from another? Are we cursed by something? No one knew. Scholars debated. Mages tried to figure out an answer. But nonetheless, it was slow. In 100 years, it only took over a couple towns, but it still could not be stopped. the deadliness of it was starting to be taken seriously. People are starting to figure out how it worked. No one thought about it as a sentience, they just thought about it as a growing infection that had to be slowed, then stopped. People started thinking about logically, but it still kept moving. As it touched things, it turned them. And the longer that they succumbed to their will before dying, the more it changed them. Within a year or two, it was still a dark version of what it was, possibly still recognizable to its loved ones. A couple of years later, it mutates more, loses any familiarity. Later on, it turns into something more monstrous, leaving nothing left behind. Nothing but creatures of darkness, eldritch, and abomination, very much of a Cthulhu aspect. The one thing everybody could agree on, that whatever this was, it was dark. And it was a plague to this world, thus the name. No one knew about its innocent beginnings that started off to just merely protect and make friends. Until even the plague itself lost its identity, knowing only one thing: to spread and to destroy. Hundreds of years passed, close to 1,000. Eventually, society learned and was raised to know that this was always around. Orders were created to figure out an answer. Societies changed to move further away from it, knowing that if you were in the next town after so many days, you would eventually have to pack up all your things and move. Thousands of years passed as the creature started to grow. Unable to move on its own, it just spread like a liquid. The world still kept moving. The world itself is separated between several kingdoms, controlling pieces. Due to the speed of the plague, it could be avoided. It started off on a small continent, and they believed that they would only have to be worried about when it got too close. The lands were separated in several portions. Kingdoms were grown. One kingdom, the elves, Nelithir, having a large amount of land in the west, very much dictated a lot of their aspects off of how they were before. Even though they did not remember, they were still the same. Somehow, intuitively still, always against humans. And they were not a big fan of mixed races. Any half-elves were always subjugated to be in the slums. And Nelithir was very careful not letting in any non-elves of any kind. Still, many were invited in, but with limited privileges. Heartwind, the lands of the humans. But on the other side, they were inviting. Whether in their favor or not, they allowed many races to join them. Still always leading by a human family and trying to make sure that the human family would always be pure human, they were always still friendly to all races, including elves, trying to always bolster peace, almost as if they were in the remembrance of Amros. But again, never remembering her. They had a continent on the east. The south itself had what eventually became the island of the Highborns. A continent itself that, small compared to the rest, kept the elite, races of what were believed to be closest to gods. Anything from angelics to demons. They even if they had nobility, whatever made them closest to the gods, they lived here, finding themselves almost like they had the right to dictate the rights and wrongs of the world. And eventually, they automatically did, giving themselves a council of what to and to not do. Anybody want to approach or not approach the orders of the plague would have to go through them. Finally, there was the one last kingdom that had some supremacy. But normally, under normal circumstances, they normally don't take in precedent. They don't live on the land, they live in the water. The kingdom of the merfolk, the Aberrant kingdom, dictated by just such tritons, lizard folk, any creatures that are water folk of any kind. They normally took neutral territory, as in the plague. Even though it affected water, it usually diluted out after so far in the water. For a long time, the Aberrant stance was that it is a land problem, and will let it be as such. After 1,000 years, war always dictated between them. Land was always had. Until it was found out and dictated by the Council of the Highborns that a solution was made. Although temporary, a solution to slow down the plague has been decided and confirmed to work. There was a way to temporarily put it to sleep. A calm, if you will. Always in every house, human, elf, Triton house, they always did follow one rule in common. The next in line would always be a blood relative. King and queen that was always next would always be of a certain lineage. And the kings and queens of each kingdom have always been descendant from an ancient line that no one knows from where. But they've always had a certain attunement to the lands. And the council was able to figure out that always the firstborn has always been able to communicate with the gods more efficiently. After several trials and errors, the Great Journey was invented. A several month pathway for a firstborn of a king and queen to take several guardians with them and commune with the gods, and maybe with information pulled together between themselves, the guardians and the gods, they could piece together the puzzle of the plague to kill it. But at the bare minimum, it worked to at least put it to sleep until that time. And therefore the Great Journey continued. The plan was of such. Every 100 years, king and queen of one of the houses of Nelithir, Avarice, or Heartwind would give up their firstborn. The firstborn would be the new chosen. An agreement of the gods that allowed this to happen. The chosens were always able to speak to the gods more casually. On a certain level, they allowed them to be as such. But it only put the creature to sleep for so long. And a routine was made. Every 100 years, no matter what happened between the elves, the humans, the Tritons, whatever war is going on, peace would always happen every 100 years. Because that would be when the creature would wake up. It only gave him a calm for so long. And to keep up his routine, the chosen beast would be switched every time. 100 years, the Heartwind king and queen would give up their firstborn. The next 100 years, the elven king and queen, their firstborn. Following the Triton. Back to the humans, and so on and so forth. With that, they must always have guardians, soldiers to protect them. from trials, tribulations, of the real world, of warriors, of anything they must face that could take advantage of them or just of the situation. And warriors of all the houses would band together to take on this great journey. But sacrifice would be had. This is not a all in all glorious event. Yes, it would bring a sense of glory and honor to their house. But no matter how well it turned out, not all of them would return. The journey would always last for about half a year. Starting from their hometown, they would journey to several temples, monasteries, making a beeline to wherever the epicenter of the plague is at the time. The plan was commune, grant the power from the gods to allow the chosen to put the creature to sleep, hibernate it. Somehow it always lasted for about 80 to 100 years. Eventually, chosens were always given more information, but never enough to really kill it. And every time, always a guardian and almost always a chosen have not returned. And it's always been both a blessing and a curse of the house to send out the firstborn, knowing that it will bring honor, but there's a possibility they might not get their child back. And for thousands of years, this tradition has passed on. But after the creature went to sleep, politics resumed. Knowing that they have 80 years to fight again, someone would always start up. Wanting more land, having some kind of argument, whatever would happen, a war would resume, as it always would. Until the creature would wake up again, peace would be had, and the trials would resume. Not every god was compliant with this, though. Some gods would give more problems. It left society with questions. Why is it only putting the creature to sleep? What are the nobles not telling us? Why is there always the guardian missing on the way back? And why is sometimes the chosen one not returned? There's always been a secret. What has happened? Why does it work but not all the way through? And why must there always be one missing, maybe two? This happened for thousands of years. There's a reoccurrence over and over again. Until we get to the last great journey, to one of uniqueness, of family, of love, and of the last great journey, where mysteries are answered and what the plague really is. We lead ourselves in to campaign 1, the great journey for the Heartwind Kingdom. But that will be for another episode. The plague itself is a vicious creature, leaving itself only darkness behind it. Forgetting itself, forgetting its purpose, forget that it's not meant to do this, but it does. Becoming twisted. Not even remembering what it's part of, that it's part of an innocent God that doesn't want this to happen. After so long, even it became alone and wanted something. And so it took it. It took humans, it took elves, it took tritons, it took races and made it its own. To a hive mind. And then it forgot everything. And that was just what it was. An abomination of a creature. Even at a certain point, it needed an extension, a way to live in the world. Saw creatures that are a threat, dragons that had powers beyond belief. And even then, it took one. An ancient dragon that its home was being threatened could not even fight against this and succumbed to its curse. And therefore, the plague gained one more thing, an ally beyond belief, an extension of itself, a harbinger for itself. It created itself the plague dragon, a creature itself that now changed the rules. You knew now what was coming when you saw the dragon. It would burn homes, it would destroy things, and if you were able to survive afterwards, then the plague itself is coming. Times had to be rushed. Now the great journey had to move forward faster. The plague was evolving, getting smarter, figuring out ways to now no longer move at a snail's pace. It wanted more. It wanted more than Averant. It wanted everything. A virus that wanted to consume all. It even took the form of a king or queen, depending on times, for anybody who saw it at its epicenter. It learned, and it became so sentient that it was evil. But again, we'll continue with the next one. So, that's it for this one. I appreciate everybody for listening in. That was the plague. The plague itself plays a huge role in campaign 1, and it plays a large role in the following campaigns. But this is important because in those campaigns, the plague is different. And to know where it started helps. So, we're going into almost present day for campaign 1. Campaign 1, again, is a hard one to watch because we were not that good at streaming yet. But if any of you feel overzealous, feel free to try it. It is on our YouTube page. Campaign 1 is on there. Tease Revenge, that is their group. If you want to try, go ahead. We will admit that we were not that good at that time. But the next few episodes we'll do is about our chosen member and her guardians. So, the next episodes, about 5, are actually going to be ones we did not cover in campaign 1. But the weeks before campaign 1, about these individual warriors that become main stage. So, next Friday, 4 p.m. Central Time, stay tuned for the next episode. We're going to have a fun one. Come and listen to The Princess in the Tower. Everybody, have a good night. See you later.